Hi there and welcome. Today we're going to discuss the latest updates in cybersecurity from Arctic Wolf. I'm delighted to be joined by Dan Larson, who's Arctic Wolf's Chief Marketing Officer, overseeing all aspects of their marketing functions. His background includes 15 years of sales, product and marketing leadership experience with a proven track record of success in the cybersecurity space. Prior to joining Arctic Wolf, Dan served as Vice President of Product Marketing at CrowdStrike, where he led the global product marketing team and was responsible for the go-to-market strategy, messaging, technical marketing, and competitive intelligence. Before CrowdStrike, Dan served 7 years as Director of Technical Marketing at McAfee Intel Security. Welcome, Dan. Pleasure to have you here. So, straight into it. From your perspective, what are you seeing as the biggest challenges in cybersecurity, and how are they evolving as they go on through time?
Yeah, so the big challenges, the trends we've been seeing the last few years, they kind of remain. We just did our annual threat report, and we saw familiar things like ransomware, business email compromise, kind of topping the list as most frequent attacks. And they're coming now with some twists. Now the ransomware actors are stealing the data to use it for double extortion in the case, in almost every case. In fact, it's 96%. So now if anyone's basically going to bother doing ransomware, they're going to steal the data first. We're also seeing the financially motivated threat actors putting a lot more attention on the business email compromise attack, especially if you're in the financial vertical. Basically, the attackers are following the money, right? So if you're a bank or a financial institution, you're actually more likely to get hit by a business email compromise attack than you are a ransomware attack. So the threat landscape, those key themes of like ransomware and business email compromise, they continue to be the top, but we're starting to see a little more targeting, based on the motivation of the attack. If it's financially motivated, it's more likely to be a business email compromise.
Oh, wow, great information there. And, with those challenges you've highlighted, what we often see is a balance around how you invest to deal with cybersecurity challenges. How are you seeing the entire concept of, tooling up versus investing in business outcomes? And how do you see organizations, potentially getting that balance right, but how do you see them also getting it wrong?
Yeah, I've been in cybersecurity for almost 20 years now. And what I have seen in my time is a trend where whenever there's a new problem, a new threat actor, a new attack technique, the industry typically, their sort of default motion is to say, oh, there's a new attack, I need a new product. And so we have this never-ending cycle of new attacks, new products. And then after 10 years of doing that, you've got this incredible amount of complexity that nobody really knows how to get value from. So a core tenet, and what Arctic Wolf is really trying to drive in the market, is to say, cybersecurity practitioners, you don't have a tools problem. What you have is an operations problem. There's a good chance that the investments you've already made, whether they're in infrastructure or if they're in cybersecurity tools, you probably have the telemetry you need to find attacks, to stop attacks, and to respond to them. And what you should think about next time you have a new problem, instead of saying, let's go get another tool, you should assess, what do you already have in the tech stack? And if you knew how to better operationalize that, you might be able to get the outcomes you're looking for with the tech you already have in-house. And that's sort of core to Arctic Wolf's kind of like, we want to make a security operations platform so we can work with what you got to get those cybersecurity outcomes that you're not going to get just by adding more tools and more complexity to the tech stack.
Building on the idea of the security and making it more operational, it's a really interesting concept. How do you see organizations really starting to integrate that into their own workflows, and how do you see that looking, and what recommendations do you have for organizations going down that path?
Yeah, sometimes I think about the current state of cybersecurity like the car industry before, the Model T, before we had the assembly line, before that industry matured to a point where it kind of had the discipline to build repeatable processes in a single way. And if you go talk to CISOs or practitioners, everything is like a bespoke, custom. Everyone is doing it in a way that's massively expensive, that's not repeatable, and there needs to be some force in the industry that starts to drive this standardization. Right, and we've always had ingredients of that. We've always had like standard frameworks and common protocols and things like that. But when it comes time to take all the telemetry for cybersecurity, feed it into a process, like the assembly line, where you get predictable outcomes from the machinery, is really the next step in my mind for the cybersecurity industry. And what we're trying to do at Arctic Wolf is build the platform so that it can take in the data, and then build the processes to get the outcomes from the data, and do all of that in a way where for the customer, it's not a mystery, it's not a black box. That's why we have this component that we call concierge security, where we're constantly talking to the customer, using them as a feedback loop to make sure that the machinery we're building is responsive to their needs as a business.
Yeah, I think that's a really good overall concept. And, you mentioned, the platform there is an important way of collecting all this and building that much more operational approach to this. Look, your new Aurora platform is very, very exciting. I'd love you to talk us through, its key capabilities and how do you see that, aligning with the evolving needs of organizations when they're looking at this operational approach to security.
Yeah, I think one of the most important trends in cybersecurity right now is kind of the shakeup that's happening in the SIM space. It seems like everybody has figured out that cybersecurity is now a data problem more than anything else. So at Arctic Wolf, for over 10 years now, we've been building the security operations platform that's designed to take in all of that data, even if it's from competitive technologies. We like to say, we're vendor neutral. We also ingest the data in a way that's very customer friendly. Right, we don't cap it based on volume of data. We don't limit the number of integrations. The customer gets a predictable price. We just say, we want one home for all of your data. And then as it goes into the platform, it gets parsed and analyzed. We use our threat intelligence and our detection logic to find threats. And then if we find a threat, we will proactively reach out to the customer. And unlike some other solutions where they say, hey, you got a problem, you should fix it, remediation and solving the problem is also something we offer. So we'll stay on the phone until the problem is done. And that works really well for customers. And it's something that puts us on a strong footing as the attack landscape intensifies. And while it is true that some companies will say, I'm going to build my own SOC, right? Like, I have the capability, we're very capable. I think that's fine for some organizations that can afford to do that. But even if you build your own, a really strong, high-performing SOC, you're probably only going to have telemetry into your own environment and what data you get from threat feeds. If you go with a service provider like Arctic Wolf, we have 10,000 customers now, right? We've got millions of endpoint agents. So our ability to have our finger on the pulse of what's going on with the threat landscape is really differentiated and something that our customers see a ton of value in.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said in that overarching platform you have where you can take in all this data from investments already made. Yeah. I think that's part of the operational life, is I'm not going to have to rip and replace or tear down. I can take the more value from what I've already invested in and layers over the top. And then the further you go into the journey, you can start looking to add on different features, which I think brings us nicely into the next point. With Aurora and Arctic Wolf extending their leadership into more endpoint security now with the acquisition of Cylance, what new choices and does this open up for clients, prospects, and customers? And I guess how does that integrating into platform change what they can do from a cybersecurity strategy point of view? Yeah.
So from the beginning, we've had this philosophy as a company to be open and vendor neutral. And now that we have our own endpoint security technology, formerly Cylance, now Aurora Endpoint Defense, we're giving our customers the option to go with our endpoint security if they choose to. But we are unique because we will continue to support the 15 other endpoint security solutions that we do, because we just believe that cybersecurity is a team sport. It's important for security operations providers like us to give the customers the choice, right? You should be able to use what works best for you. Our job as a security operations provider is to get you the outcome, whether you choose to use our endpoint security or somebody else's. And that's core to our strategy. But we're also seeing this trend in the market where there's a desire for vendor consolidation. People want to have fewer vendors. They want to have more capability in one platform. So we can offer that as well. So for us, we're trying to take this really customer-friendly approach, which is if consolidation is your goal, great. We have a really capable, strong endpoint security tool that you can adopt. But if you just renewed with an endpoint security tool that you love and you don't want to have the conversation for 3 more years, that's okay too. Because the real North Star is giving the customer choice and making sure they're getting the outcome.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way of framing it. And I'm kind of interested in the breadth. You were talking about the number of customers, the number of endpoint agents you have out there, and looking at where Aurora has come from and what you've done with the endpoint capability. And really, that platform was one of the trailblazers around machine learning, and especially for taking that data set and being much more proactive in cybersecurity. It'd be great, Dan, if you could just give us a little bit of color and overview around what you're seeing around AI, machine learning, and an entire data-driven strategy that you're building out as an advantage for users of your solution set.
Yeah, so the Arctic Wolf platform has been around for over 10 years now, and through our own just growth as a company, it's operating at a massive global scale. It's processing over 8 trillion security observations every week. So we have this massive amount of data coming from multiple telemetry sources, right? We have over 200 integrations from infrastructure products, cybersecurity products on the endpoint, in the network, in the cloud. So we've got this incredible treasure trove of data that any data scientist, it would be like a playground for them to come and work on. But also because we've got 10 years of history of looking at that data and drawing conclusions. Right? Does this combination of data, result in a conviction, in a confirmed true positive for an attack, or does this combination of data lead us to some other conclusion? That ability, or the fact that we have both the data set and the collection of conclusions to draw from that data, means we have necessary inputs to make more predictive AI models. That will do better efficacy on detection and prevention of threats. And with Cylance, we get a strong team of data scientists. We get 3.5 million more endpoints deployed all around the globe to feed us even more telemetry into that system. So it's going to be a big boost for us. And as generative AI kind of takes hold in the market and people want more the ability to have that kind of chatbot experience with the UI, we're in a really strong position because as you have a model and as that model tries to make conclusions from the data, sometimes it's right and sometimes it's wrong. So you have to do this thing called reinforcement learning. Somebody has to be there to check the model and tell it if it's right or wrong. And one thing that Arctic Wolf can bring to bear that most of our competitors can't is that we have 1,000 security engineers delivering that concierge service for our customers every day. So we've got this army of security experts tuning the models all day, every day. So we're really optimistic about how AI is going to not only drive better detections for our customers, but also make the whole system more efficient.
Shifting to the topic of risk, specifically how to manage it, which I think is becoming much more prescient for organizations. What's your and Arctic Wolf's approach to cybersecurity risk management, and what steps do you think organizations should start on to reduce their risk exposure?
Yeah, so this is there was a demarcation line in my career when I thought to myself, the job of cybersecurity is to, stop threats or managed attacks. That's how I used to think about it. And since joining Arctic Wolf, I've kind of taken another step and said, really, cybersecurity should be a tool for mitigating business risk, not just cyber risk. And in that world, it means that a cybersecurity vendor, they should mitigate as much risk as possible, right? So they should use tools and process and technology to reduce the likelihood of an incident occurring. So an endpoint security product like we just acquired, that's great for that, right? If you have really strong endpoint prevention, you're less likely to have an incident, so the risk goes down. But the whole reason, MDR and even EDR exist is because that'll never be perfect. You have to have some way to detect and respond to threats that can't be prevented. So that maturity or that capability has to be mature as well. But after that, the next thing you have to consider is, all right, if that is driving down risk, both in terms of making it less likely and making it less impactful because you have good detection response capability, even if you've done the absolute best you can at that, there's always going to be a little bit of residual risk. And our mission is to end cyber risk, and you can't do that unless you have an answer for that residual risk. And so for us, we try to do two things. We think, well, one, some of the risk, or in general, what you have to do is transfer the remaining risk. And there's two avenues for transferring that risk. One of them is back onto the vendor. So in our case, we offer the industry's biggest cybersecurity warranty at $1.5 million. So if we don't do our job, right, the customer has some recourse to help cover the cost from the warranty. But the next thing is, and one of the biggest drivers in cybersecurity right now is this desire to get cyber insurance. So we have established partnerships with over 100 brokers and carriers all around the globe where they can use our tools to assess their current cybersecurity posture, understand what they need to do to become insurable. And in fact, we have this tool called Cyber Jumpstart that's open to the public, and you can go in there and you can work on it. And if you fill out the forms and you feed it the data, it'll actually give you an insurability rating, and you can take that to a broker to help you qualify for insurance. And one thing that we learned through this process is that oftentimes the one thing people really need in order to qualify for insurance is a retainer. And incident response retainers historically have been kind of out of reach for small businesses or medium enterprises because they usually end up, with a price tag of like $100,000. So I think that's one of the big barriers why so many organizations can't get cyber insurance, is because they can't afford to get one of these incident response retainers. So Arctic Wolf, we kind of tackled that problem in an innovative way. We found to get a sub $10,000 incident response retainer that we call a Jumpstart retainer. That one gives them the coverage they need if they have an incident. It is a real retainer. You get access to incident response team, you get priority access, you get preferential rates on the service. So it's a real retainer. But the secondary value of that, other than having the coverage you need if you have an incident, is that it's kind of like a fast pass to getting cyber insurance. So we're really working those angles. Like, of course, we're trying to mitigate as much risk as we can. But we also, what kind of makes us different from some other vendors in the market, is that we work really hard to help the customers transfer their risk. Because if you mitigate as much as you can and you transfer the rest, then you really have ended your cyber risk.
Yeah, and I think that's a key message, that the warranties and the insurability piece, they're not typical IT or cybersecurity conversations, right? They're very much a business conversation where someone else in the organization is responsible for trying to source cyber insurance, and it's the same in Australia. The costs are going up. The warranties are very, very interesting, how they work, how you get in the insurance. So I would really strongly recommend anyone looking at the warranties and entire insurance piece, that the Arctic Wolf approach gives a very, very different outcome to that conversation and allows IT to have a much more broad-based business conversation back with their own peers,
and
right?
If you are that practitioner out there who's trying to justify your cybersecurity budget, it's a whole lot easier if the vendor backs it up with a warranty and they give your legal team or your risk team an avenue to spending less on cyber insurance.
Yeah, and the other thing, just to conclude on that, obviously the concierge service that you get with Arctic Wolf actually helps organizations align around risk compliance frameworks, which again feed into that same conversational piece of, hey, I'm doing the right steps from IT and my processes, and I can help prove this by adherence to, in Australia, things like Essential 8, which again can help with the risk you perceive from an insurer, and overall reducing insurance premiums. And
at any time we can attest to the progress we've made, right? So maybe you already have cyber insurance, but now it's renewal time. And what we hear a lot is people have increasing premiums or they're decreasing the coverage. And at renewal time, you'll be on the hook to convince them that you have hardened your security posture, you have become more secure. And the beauty of Arctic Wolf is you can connect with your concierge team. They can give you a list of all of the projects that they did. They can give you a sense of like where you were a year ago and where you are now. And that goes a long way. We've seen our customers get up to a 25% reduction in their insurance premiums just by doing that work and giving the insurer the evidence that you have made progress thanks to Arctic Wolf.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those key benefits any customer working with Arctic Wolf gets is that ongoing access to an improvement. It's not a fixed point in time, I'm now offering you these types of services. It's an ongoing journey around improving cybersecurity posture, reducing risk. So
that's why we call it security journey. It's never done.
It is always a journey.
Security is a journey, not a destination.
And look, just I guess concluding on that, that entire IT cyber cost versus business. Cybersecurity costs have always been very, very difficult to quantify in terms of ROI, right? They're often reduced to a basic, cost benefit. I'm going to spend this much money and it should alleviate this problem, and that problem may cost this. But budgets are tightening everywhere, even for security. How are you helping organizations justify the additional or changing investment in cybersecurity, and how do you look to demonstrate, the real implications and impact of working with Arctic Wolf?
Yeah, a trend we've seen in the market in the last few years is that if someone is considering buying, or if they have already bought and need to renew their contract for their cybersecurity solution, the customer expects the vendor to show them, what have you done for me lately? Like, what ROI have you delivered? So Arctic Wolf has built out a value program, both for people considering buying the solution and for those who are considering renewing. And we look at the value calculation through kind of two main lenses. Lens number one is, if I were to have a cybersecurity incident, what would it cost me? And this is one insurers are especially keen to understand, because usually the true cost of a data breach comes from the cleanup effort. So that's why they're so keen on making sure you have an incident response retainer, because those retainer offer special rates for the cleanup effort. So we look at that and we say, in a world where you don't have Arctic Wolf, it is likely, based on your risk profile, based on the vertical you're in, based on your revenue, if you were to suffer a cyber attack, the cost would likely be this without Arctic Wolf, and it would be this with Arctic Wolf. And a lot of that, the reason it's so much less when you have Arctic Wolf, part of it is the warranty. Part of it is our ability to detect things quicker, respond to them quicker. So even if the worst were to happen, right, the incident could be contained and the total cost would be less. Now, that's fine, but if you don't suffer a breach, then this whole value conversation was a waste of time and it's irrelevant. And where people really see the value with Arctic Wolf, what they can really bank on is when they look at choosing a service offering like like Arctic Wolf, versus a do-it-yourself approach where you have to buy a SIM, store the data, buy the threat intelligence feeds, hire a staff to look at to have eyes on glass 24/7, to buy the other tools necessary for response and cleanup and all of that. So we call that an operational value or ROI assessment. And both of these are available for customers if they're considering purchasing. And really the cost savings of going with a service versus doing it yourself is tremendous, right? Standing up, even for a small business, to make all the capital investments for the tools, and then to hire 8 to 10 people, which you need to run a 24/7 SOC, you're in the millions of dollars. Right? And we can do it for a fraction of that cost.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very strong message around cybersecurity. Just, the breadth of access to information you have, then wrapping up in the platform, then the entire conversation piece around, retainers, insurability. There's a lot of additional value, then wrapping in an ROI message around how to justify the transformation. I think it's something that every organization should be looking at. But Dan, look, thanks for the time today. As we come to wrap it up, is there any summary of the key takeaways or any final thoughts you'd like to share with us just around any organization starting the cyber journey or where their next steps that they should be focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing for me is for members of the cybersecurity community to really think about changing their mindset from having this like tools-based, always adding new tools, always adding more complexity, to kind of step back and think about maybe it really is an operational problem. And maybe you can get more value out of the investments you've made if you really tackle the operations problem, which is what Arctic Wolf is here to help with.
No, thanks for that, Dan. And look, thank you for everyone's time today watching this video. If you're keen to discuss or learn more, please reach out to one of Compnow's representatives to discuss how we, along with Arctic Wolf, can help with all aspects of cybersecurity.